Concerns continue to be raised on the literacy crisis in the country. The 2023 National Reading Barometer in South Africa indicates, among others, that nearly 3 in 5 homes lack access to a single fiction or non-fiction book. Based on this report, it's predicted that by 2026, 69% of 10-year-olds will struggle to read for meaning. Educational psychologist Seago Maapola joins us now to discuss the report's very worrying findings. Seago, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. Such worrying figures, but perhaps it's important to start with the implications of poor literacy skills in children. How does it impact them?
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about because in practice and also in the spaces that I've worked, you really get to see the full impact of children that have low literacy levels. It impacts them scholastically, where they're not able to pass and progress from one grade to the next. And ultimately, we see that a lot of the children, when they especially get to high school, they drop out. And we also expect them to, when they're in grade 12, to actually sit and write the national exams, whereas the ability to read is far below the actual age. And so we know that the educational outcomes are so poor for children that have low literacy levels. And that's why it's such a big deal that we really need to invest time and resources to get them to a point where they're able to read properly and on their age level.
And we also understand that it also impacts their self-confidence over time.
Absolutely. So when children are not able to read properly, they are very much aware of the fact that they don't function on the same level as everyone else. And therefore, it does cause a lot of confidence issues where they don't want to read in class and they don't want to engage in class conversations because they know that they're not on the same level as everyone else. And so it's important that we're able to monitor and diagnose this as early as possible so we can put the proper measures in place, because early diagnosis really does help for better remediation going forward.
That's very heartening. Now to the findings. The most concerning is that 3 out of 5 homes lack single fiction or non-fiction books. It's important to get context here for there to be some sort of distinction. When we say books, are we talking about children's books in the homes, or we're saying any kind of book?
That's a really good question. I think it's important that we make a distinction that it's the books that the children are able to relate to.
All right.
Because if we're now talking about any type of book, you could pick up a book on any other topic, but
Yes.
It is way beyond your age, and therefore you're not always going to understand the content of what is being said, and you are going to have trouble understanding or comprehending what the book is about. And so I think it's important that we're able to understand that from the onset, reading doesn't just happen at school or with the teachers, it actually happens at home as well. And so the first way that we're able to expose our children to reading is by us reading to them before we expect them to read by themselves. And that is having to read age-appropriate books with pictures, things that you can use to actually make sure that they're able to understand what they're reading. And I think the important part about reading with your kids is that you can use the tone of your voice to emphasize certain things and certain emotions. It really just also helps them to be aware of what is going on within themselves, identify with the characters, but also build empathy and understanding that other people are also going through something, and really just is a nice way to be socially aware of what's going on. So it definitely has to be age appropriate.
So when do we introduce the age appropriate books? So when do we start reading? Because I know some experts say pre-literacy skills should be introduced as early as birth. So when exactly
Yes.
would be the most beneficial time to start?
And so reading isn't just, we read because of learning, right? But reading is also a very nice way to bond as a family. And so if possible, in utero, you read amazing books to your infant in utero, and once they come out as well, you really just enjoy spending time with them by reading books, even if you think they don't understand. But the fact that you're spending time with them, they get to hear the sounds, they get to identify the tone of your voice changing. And so as early as possible, I would suggest that you do that. And if you haven't had the chance to do that, it's never too late. You start as soon as today.
Then to the role of early childhood development centres. I mean, some often place disproportionate responsibility on them to ensure that kids are literate. And perhaps sometimes it's not due to mischief, but because parents are just absolutely so busy just trying to earn some sort of a living for these children. So what role can ECDs play?
ECDs play such a crucial role, and I do understand that in the country we have so many underprivileged ECDs that actually don't have access to resources, to books that are age appropriate, to coloring books and things like that. And so it is important that where companies are able to, where government is able to, where communities are able to donate books to the ECD centers, because it really is a very amazing way of ensuring that we are securing and setting our children up for success for the future. And so I really think that I know there's an initiative, for example, that Wimpy is running, where they are giving and disseminating books to ECD centers around the country to ensure that they have the books that they need and to ensure that they're able to comprehend what they're reading. And so I really think that initiatives like that make it slightly easier to have access to the books, to have the resources, and set the kids up for success.
Now, before we close this interview, I want to find out the role of gadgets, smart gadgets or even television, because some think that we can easily throw gadgets at children and they get to learn more about certain languages, etc. But others say it actually compromises their development, where you have children that lack social skills. What is the impact of throwing gadgets at children?
That is such a controversial question, but I'm glad that you've asked it. And so I really think that it's important that as parents, as caregivers and families, we are aware that screen time is not all bad. But we have to do it within boundaries, and we have to keep note of the fact that it has to be in line with the child's developmental age and everything that's going on. So it is not appropriate to say a child must watch TV 5 hours in a day because you want them to learn English or get to learn all these other skills. And if you are going to let your child watch TV for a certain amount of time, it is important that you're also able to watch with them, not only to monitor what it is they're watching, but also to interact and to engage with them, because otherwise they get lost in a world. And we also get to see that there actually are certain challenges that come from children that watch too much TV or they're on their gadgets a lot. Anything from gross motor skills, fine motor skills that they struggle with, all which are very necessary for learning. We see that sometimes children struggle with attention because they are glued to the TV that has a lot of stimulation. And the second you say read a book that doesn't really move and have pictures, then they get bored because I want something to stimulate my brain. And so it is important, especially for that fact, that when children are on their screens, they do it for a certain amount of time with supervision, and we're able to ensure that they actually are learning and they're not just lost in a world that we can't even check what's happening.
All right, Seago, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That's Seago Maapola. She's an educational psychologist speaking to us now on the illiteracy crisis that we've heard of. It's believed that 3 out of 5 households actually don't have fiction or non-fiction books for children to read.